Good evening. It's loud. So one of the things I found out when I stand in front of folks is that I get more comfortable if I actually lead a song. So turn your songbooks to number 122. We're going to start off singing The Love of God tonight. Number 122. Since the love of God has shed priceless blessings on my head, I have made it my own. I will hide it in my heart, that it never may depart. It shall rule there alone. The love of God within the heart will kindliness and warmth impart. The soul will glow like Jesus in his tender mercy, if the heart is made his dwelling place. The love of God glows like a flame through endless years. It is the same. The love of God will never fail nor lose its glory till we see him face to face. Since the Son of God came down with his love our lives to crown, he with us would remain. Greater love there could not be. Jesus died for you and me. In our hearts he would reign. The love of God within the heart will kindliness and warmth impart. The soul will glow like Jesus in his tender mercy, if the heart is made his dwelling place. The love of God glows like a flame through endless years. It is the same. The love of God will never fail nor lose its glory till we see him face to face. While his love burns true and bright, we are walking in the light. He has shown us the road we his glory must reflect, lest our dimness and neglect keep some soul from its God. The love of God within the heart will kindliness and warmth impart. The soul will glow like Jesus in his tender mercy, if the heart is made his dwelling place. The love of God glows like a flame through endless years. It is the same. The love of God will never fail nor lose its glory till we see him face to face. Nope, that didn't help. So tonight we're talking about love. And in Matthew 22, verses 36 through 40, it says, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" And he said to him, "You shall love your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And on these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets." So we see here, love God, love our neighbors. All the other commandments hinge on these two. And when we get these two right, everything else tends to fall into place. Looking out for God means we're keeping to his word. And keeping to his word means we'll look out for our neighbors. So what exactly is love? In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, we know this is the love chapter. I'm going to read the entire chapter real quick. "But if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have and deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude, and it does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. Back to the first part, love is patient and kind. Now, I think we've all got experience with not being patient and kind. I know personally, don't ask me about patience and kindness when I'm driving. I can get a little bit ill with people. But patience and kindness, I think, though, will win a soul when nothing else will. How many of us have lost our temper before, and how many times did we regret it? I'm sure when we lose our temper, I know I do things and I've said things that I didn't need to say or do. But on the flip side, how many times did being unexpectedly kind win a friend or solve a problem? I've figured out as a father that nothing can make me feel smaller than when one of my children called me out. We were in Atlanta for Lads to Leaders a few years back, and the group of us were walking along the street, and one of the homeless folks up there came up to me and McKenna. We were in the back of the line, and he made a beeline for us, but we were back there. And I never carry any cash, so I did have a legitimate reason not to give him anything, but he was just asking for money. And when I told him, I said, "Sir, I don't carry any cash on me. I don't have anything on me." My little girl spoke up and said, "But Daddy, I got some money." And so you know, it can make you feel about that little when you realize that they're actually doing what you're supposed to be doing. Just to even it out with a Michaela story, there was a time when she wasn't even in school yet, and Rachel and I were having a conversation about some of the kids in her class at Stripling and how the poor kids didn't have anything. We had mentioned how many kids there were and those kind of things, and we were talking maybe, seeing if there was some things we could do for the kids at the time. And a little while later, again, Michaela, not even in grade school yet, comes walking in the living room with a buggy, one of the little baby carriages full of toys. And some of the stuff she had just gotten a couple of weeks ago. She brings it in there and she says, "I want to give these toys to Mommy's kids." So, I mean, kids have just a way of really calling you out without even meaning to. And I think sometimes that has kept me humble and has helped me realize things that, some failings that I have with things like that. Back to the chapter. Love is not arrogant or rude. Anybody, and you don't have to raise your hand, but does anybody recall making a friend in a moment of arrogance or rudeness? I think it's something that we all struggle with on occasion, especially when we know we're right. I think there's always that occasion when we just want to make the point that we're right. We're not really trying to help somebody or move somebody into a different position. We just know we're right, and we're going to make sure you know it. A lot of times, and you can ask my family this, I get into discussions that I shouldn't. Sometimes my intentions going into the discussion can be pure, but my pride gets in the way. I'm determined, like I say, to prove the other guy wrong instead of helping him to learn the truth or trying to make my point in a loving way. But no matter how factually right I am, if my intentions are not loving, then it's not right. It's not the way it's supposed to be. Love does not insist on its own way. Husbands and wives, isn't this where some of our biggest struggles come from? Especially when we're first married, I think that independence still tugs at us. It's mine, or I've always done it this way. How many times have we said that or thought that or implied that, and it stopped the argument right there? I think a lot of times it keeps it going. And what about other relationships? Employee, employer, church groups, other family members, other social groups. Let me ask y'all a question now. What are some ways to get around this? What are some ways to fight this urge? I think sometimes you just have to let it go. Just like the song says from the Disney movie, you just got to let it go. One thing that I had considered too, I think sometimes you have to figure out if changing membership in that group is an option? Is it healthy? Like Blake said this morning, threatening people is not the way to get your way, especially not in the church. Saying that you're even, and not just threatening, but actually going through with the threat, leaving because you're having a disagreement. That's not loving. That's not a way to show others that you really care about them. Yeah, it's not a way to show God you're really caring. That's right. And I was having a discussion. Another thing I think that helps us fight this urge is prayer. I was talking to David Scott a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about sometimes how we wish that prayer would be a little more immediate in our minds when we're facing issues with people or with things. I was telling him that there are some nights I lay awake and I'm just laying there for 2 or 3 hours, and then all of a sudden it hits me. I should pray about it. And so then I'll pray about whatever it was, and I'll be asleep in 5 minutes. You know, I wish it was a little quicker than that, but I don't think sometimes it always just comes right to the surface. Love is not irritable or resentful. Holding grudges or inspiring new ones is not love. It's normal to be irritable on occasion. We've all been there. We've all had lack of sleep or any other number of things that have weighed on us, and we've snapped a little bit or been a little fussy. But it's not good. It's not good for anybody to live in that frame of mind. And also, you can't love someone that you resent. Resentfulness keeps you from acting in someone's best interest. If you don't like them, you're not going to do anything for them. You're not going to help them out. And, you know, you've heard different phrases about people that people just don't care about other people, and the things that they would do are atrocious to them, you know. But you won't have their best interest in mind whenever a problem does arise with them if you resent them. And now, I say that, and I've had struggles with this before. And I've always said this, and I'll always believe this because I think that's the way it worked in my own life, but I think forgiveness sometimes can be a process. And the worse the offense, the harder it can be to move on. But I have finally reached the point with these individuals that if I see them on the side of the road, instead of swerving towards them, I'm stopping to see if I can help. You know, that's how I know I've gotten over it, you know. But one of the reasons that for that struggle, though, was the resentfulness of them as well that was being sent towards me. So we have to be careful of being resentful, but we also have to be careful about our feelings towards those who might resent us, especially in church. There's no place for resentment when it comes to our fellow Christians. My father-in-law once wrote, "When you understand the love of God, it compels you to live for Christ. And the love that God has for me, I should have for others." I think we have to be especially mindful of that when people have done us wrong. We have to move on, and we have to look to the love of God for our own example into how to treat them. Love does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. How many of you you've probably seen a placard on somebody's desk or a sign somewhere, anywhere, Matthew 7:1, "Judge not that you be judged." I think it's probably the most used scripture in our society, but I also think it's misapplied a lot of times. The Bible is a reflection of our lives, and when people aren't living by it, they don't like the reflection that it casts, so they don't want to see it. Then they throw this verse out as a way to deflect that reflection that they're having to face. I think they even go as far, a lot of times, to ask us to approve of what they're doing. But that's not what we're called to do. Is it loving to allow someone to live in sin so that we don't hurt their feelings? Or is it loving to tell them the truth regardless of our emotional consequences? I think it's safe to say we've all got family members that probably are not living the way they should. But have we talked to them about these things? Have we approached them about the way they're living? Or do we keep it to ourselves in an effort to protect our own feelings? Some of us have taken it further than others. And I think ultimately it's hopeful that they're going to come to these conclusions on their own, but you still have to set the example, and you still have to talk to them, because it's not loving just to let them continue down a path, even if even regardless of what the world tells you, if they're going down a dangerous path, at some point you have to say, you're going down a dangerous path. But we do not join them, and we cannot condone what they're doing. Love never ends. Love survives everything. Bad choices. Thank God for this one, because we've all made bad choices from time to time. But remember when others make bad decisions that affect us. Matthew 6:14, for if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. Persecution. John 15:13. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. A little later in the chapter, verse 18, if the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. Because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. In Revelation 2:10, do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you in prison, that you may be tested. And for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. Regardless of what's going on around us, even just outside the door sometime, we don't face what's happened to these folks at this time, but the time may come. If we are truly loving God and we're truly loving each other, it won't affect what we have here. But it's something that we need to be mindful of. It's something we need to be thinking about, because those times could come for us. And if we were thrown in prison, if we were threatened with execution, would we be able to stand up to it? What we have to remember is that everything on this earth is temporary, even our troubles. Making love our primary focus will help us to get that crown of life. Love also survives disagreements. If you love someone, simple disagreements don't mean anything. It is the commitment to the other individual's well-being that will keep these disagreements in their proper perspective. One thing I try to tell my girls, especially when it comes to marriage, is never use the word divorce. Take it out of your vocabulary. Don't even think about it, because you don't want to solve your problems by threatening the other person that you're out if it doesn't go your way. And it's not good for the other individual. If you're truly looking out for the other individual, you're not going to want to just give up and throw in the towel. But how many friendships are lost? How many marriages are destroyed? Or congregations even split over simple things like the color of curtains. There isn't a disagreement big enough that we should forget our commitment to one another or to God. Because honoring our commitments to one another is honoring our commitments before God. And it was Christ's prayer that we be unified. John 17:22, the glory that you have given me, I have given to them, that they may be one, even as we are one. I and them, and you and me, that they may become perfectly one, so that the world may know that you sent me and loved them, even as you loved me. We shouldn't let petty disagreements keep us apart. The greatest gift is love. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. There's no way to top what God has done for us. And after everything else is gone, love remains. I hope I've given you some thoughts to take with you. There's no doubt that we're part of a loving congregation here. But there's also no doubt that we're not perfect. We can do better. And that's really all I've got to say tonight. I know it's a little bit succinct, but that's the way I do things. I don't have a lot to filler material, but any thoughts? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's sometimes hard to do, and you have to work at it. It just doesn't come easy and naturally. But if you let God into your life, that love will come into you.
Well, I think, like I say, I think sometimes it's like forgiveness, in that sometimes it's a process. to getting to know people and getting to love on them. That's one thing I like about our visitation group. Whenever I know we're having visitation group, y'all might see me running around here like a crazy person, because if somebody's been attending church services for a little while, I try my best to get them to come to visitation group, because we're all a little more relaxed. We're all showing each other that love that's not, sometimes it's just not possible to do right after services. We've had the idea at some points to take people out to dinner after church, but I really think the visitation group is our strongest asset, in that we get in front of people. They get to know us, because there's a lot of ways to get to know folks, but the best way, I think, is to share a meal.
Well, we have a tendency to go with people we already know.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of asking people we just met.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to go with people you know.
Yeah. Well, and yes, exactly. I've said that to the kids a couple of times too. You can't stay in your comfort zone. But I'll tell you this too, and I'm gonna brag on Cheryl for a second. But the person I learned really just to watch and move around and try to get people engaged is from watching Cheryl, because Cheryl Bolin is probably the best one at that, because she is not afraid to meet people, not afraid at all. She will walk right up to somebody when they just walked in the door, introduce herself, and try her best to get them to talk to her. And I think there's always things we can work at and we can always get better at. But that's who I really kind of followed in trying to do that same thing, trying to be that guy that kind of will get on your nerves because he's walking around talking to you all the time.
I was just thinking, one of the visitations at yours and Rachel's house, I looked around and there's 4 new people there, and even Rachel had gotten to come. That was right before COVID, I think. Somebody who made a big difference. But I was thinking, that passage, God knows right how to get to the heart of things, You do so good, and then you're maybe with your family, you're with every minute of every day for that whole week or something, you get a little irritation or whatever. And, the way Jesus spoke in 1 Corinthians 13, man, God knows exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree with that. And it's one of those things, like I say, it's hard. It's one of the, it's like raising kids. It's one of the hardest things you can do, but it's also the most rewarding. There's a lot goes into it, and there's a lot of different aspects to it. There's no better calling than for us to be loving towards one another and towards those around us. And if we're loving towards one another, that's gonna show when people come in here. When they walk through those doors and they see how we interact with one another, that's either going to make them want to become a part of it or make them want to get away from it as fast as possible. So there's not a lot of leeway on that one. And I think that goes back to what Susie was saying too about getting out of your comfort zone. We're all comfortable the way things are. It's hard to get up and change where I think I am, because I know I need to, but it's now I got to get up and do it. I think a lot of times intellectually, it's all in there. You know, a lot of times you've got it down in your mind, but then when it comes to the action, I think a lot of times it gets lost in translation. Because I think we all want to do good. It's just we tend to mess up. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, and that's a good point too. I think sometimes we do think all we got to do is tolerate each other, but that's not what we're called to do. And like Pat said, sometimes it's just a simple little act that will win somebody over to you. Chick-fil-A preached that, and still does. I mean, they're constantly. It's not always. Well, even their ad campaign now is the little things. It's just sometimes it's just a little smile or just going out of your way to talk to somebody. You just never know when you're going to run into somebody who's having a really bad day, and all they needed was you to come up and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And then you've just lifted their spirits.
I think we have to also really consider the fact that Jesus died for that person there the same as he died for
Mm-hmm.
me. And when we look at other people like that, we will have the love for them that we should have, knowing that Jesus sacrificed himself for that drug addict or that sad, miserable person, just like he did for me. And that just changes your whole attitude
Mm-hmm.
about people in general. If that person is worth Jesus dying for, then there's something about him that I need to look at and realize he needs love too.
And I think that's one of those things that intellectually we know that. Another story about McKenna, though, we were headed home from church one day, and over at the trolley stop, I can't remember if it's on 4th or 5th Street, we were going up that way, and there was a man laying on a bench, and we went by there a couple of different weeks, and he was there a couple of different times, and she's the one that came up with the idea that we needed to go get him a hamburger. I've got great kids, by the way, but anyway, intellectually, I know that's what I should have been thinking. Intellectually, that's exactly how it should have gone. But until she said, "Daddy, we need to go get that man something to eat," it didn't dawn on me as well. And that's something I've got to. I used to be good at that, but I got to work on it a little bit more. Like I say, intellectually, it's all there, but it's just remembering to do it when I have the opportunities.
Our class, latest Bible class on Fridays, we've been studying the life of Jesus, and we have discussed many times about the fact that what he taught was so different from what people believed. It was love everybody, and nobody at that time could believe that somebody was preaching that much love. And that made him so different, and I think that's one of the things that drew people to him, was that message. And if I would learn to incorporate that much love in my life, I'm going to draw more people to God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. And we all need examples in our lives for sure. My kids aren't always my example, but they do set a pretty good one for me sometimes. Any other thoughts? David, before the last bell rings, would you lead us in a word of prayer just to close us out? Before the first bell rings.